Zangye Dudjom Jula Janzala Josun Dembe Shingurula Yime Nguje Ye Namjube Dabe Java Jesus Ngadu Jo Chive Genye Malu Shao Choju Gursum Dabe Je Maja Jala Ye Ran Dabe Taishi Jimame Zobe Janju Semge Deje Janju Sem Dawa Sumjir Limbala Zero Drambe Dine Janju Jandong Beche Shushin Metadan Ranin Shingende Gembande Zange Shindu Mide Drugun Namda Shinla Chuba Sho Idam Guru Rana Menda Kendere Yada Yame Sampa Nyur Drubma Jeda Jijon Demande Chigi Kala Gondo So Ganda Joju Dongi Jidena Deshil Nomara Jeva Sushigan Tender Dembe Chigi Charan Bebe Sembaranda Batam Dere Jeje Arya Dambal Hayegadan Ludan Jinke Drivum Dadami Kanamdan Rawa Gungi Dani Chitamba Tamjege Dusu Tegurje Duzum Sange Tamjege Ngawang Ridan Kingur Kyabje Kadrin Sampa Meba Dinjin Savelame Shavgi Dudjom Mebala Govu Rabdu Dude Chatral Dagi Gyuchingi Lava Damba Zedu Omen Shugi Ingi Parane Duzum Sangi Gungi Ngawang Ransim Chugu Ngasu Dan Zabat Savelame Dagi Chingi La Tene Tangbo Sampa Gyachewa Chanju Semgi Gulong Dang Tab Gyachewa Sama Ngagi Gulong Nibude Sa Tabje Senrona.
So to begin, we should ask that you bring to your listening to the teachings and to your practice today two forms of motivation. The first is the vast intention that is related to the Mahayana, and the second is the vast skillful means of tantric practice.
Dangbo Sampa Gyachewa Chanju Semgi Gulong Sedeyade Ma Gyur Nankan Tadang Nyambe Semjan Tamje Namba Tamje Kemba Yang Taba Zoga Sangye Yi Koban Rinpoche Dagi Chine Gyan Shawar Cha Te Chedo Tambe Chugi Duzu Samu Sanjing then Nyamso Longwa Givo Nyambe Gulong number Taba Sardagati Sampa Gyachewa Chanju Semgi Gulong Sengedege Nyingwe Tun Dewa Tawashire.
So this motivation, the first motivation, that which is related to the Mahayana, that is to say, the development of the precious mind of awakening, is this. We think of all sentient beings, our mothers whose numbers fill the infinity of space. And we think that we develop the determination to bring each and every one of these sentient beings to the full, complete, omniscient enlightenment of Buddhahood. And in order to do so, we develop the motivation to listen to the teachings today, listen to the profound nectar of the Buddha's teachings, and later to cultivate the experience of those teachings in order that we ourselves might attain enlightenment and thereby have the capacity to lead other sentient beings to that same state. So this then constitutes this motivation of the precious mind of awakening.
Tene tabje chawa sawa nga ji kono singte sawa nga de tumo mayimbege ngagi cheche de karresede tabdan sherab nige tumo mayimbe chebarchenge yende yebe yumzan tene sawa ngagi singdere tene sawa ngagi kono de kan chegore sena Dor Dushana Tagwet Nawa Singade. Tagwet Nawa de Chi Nawa Nugin Jigdan Tamje, Yum Nagi Ranjin do Ta, Nang Chuge Simjan Tamjege, Pumbu de Kangaru Ta, Sangwa Nyumabanga de Yishinga number Taba, Yin Samne, Samgore, Mayimba la yimbar samdeva rabatinde gomare yimba la yimbar shebe lo shagore tan thambe ngola tega range de yinaya tanda ngado lobur chunang nawala shayonde tene madabe nawade shayon bare tene tene ngado tanda namjang kopan drobar shebe lamna ne yude tango 대다고 yin 타바 바시게 나와 yin 삼네 삼로데 삼로게 펜바된 건데 땅데 샤기나 되네 제마 데 펜베 슈데라 콤베 템바톰르데 되네 나세 타바람잠 서 샤르토베레 The second form of motivation is that which is related to the skillful means of the Vajrayana, the secret mantra path. And the special qualities of this secret mantra path are related to the union of skillful means and transcendent knowledge. And this union of skillful means and transcendent knowledge constitutes the skillful means or the special qualities of the tantric path. Now, how do we bring this motivation to listening to the teachings? We begin by thinking, in brief, that we begin by thinking of pure vision. We cultivate pure vision. Now, this, first of all, relates to all things outside of ourselves, the environment of the entire universe. Is comprised of the 5 elements, and we think of them as being pure. We then turn our attention to ourselves and to all sentient beings, and we think of what constitutes our bodies. And we think again that everything that comprises our bodies is in itself pure. And then we turn our attention to the contents of our minds, the thoughts or negative emotions in our minds, and we think of all of the contents of our minds, everything that turns within our minds, as being the display of primordial wisdom. So this is, in brief, what we mean by pure vision. And when we cultivate this pure vision, it is not to pretend that something which is one way is another, but rather to affirm to ourselves that this sight of pure vision is the way things are, and that our temporary experience of deluded perception is just that, temporary. And so because we are
persons on the path to enlightenment, we must begin by this affirmation of pure vision. And the more that we affirm this to ourselves, that pure vision is to see things in their true nature, with familiarity with this pure vision, it will become our way of seeing. This will become a stable experience and perception, and this will take us along the path to enlightenment.
Well, that will be a number of topics on it. Then, Kanshi Sember Chave Chugirimba, the Ringi Chebe Kapsu Papa, Kariresana, the Ringi to the day, Manzugi, you come Dilla. Zaraching Nagabji Chumbe, Dorje, Data Bugi, Zaragi, Nagab, the Langan to Peve looks at ceasing insurance, ceasing at the Madugama Karichum, but the Lord Rishindo, the Colondabo, cognitive till Pabiundi, then a young Titabugi, Ganjik, Chayong Yage. Nyanga yore tende yendu te dar ngosu chebe ken mena yang ngaranso kansa gi simgyula sorwa rakpachi kege yore karicheni kege yore sana te narge karichungba tege trensu teble the young year, then it to the ring to the Nangachimbo Yenza, then the Chirish, Chi can, then the Nangi can, Sangway can, Lasaway can, Dramanda Yore, Gantenzula, Pembe Tap, Shiwe Tap, Minjungwe Tap, Korla, then Death Shui. This then is the motivation that we bring to listening to any teaching of the Mahayana and the Vajrayana. And so today's teaching concerns what we might call a memorial service today. Today is a day of great tragedy for this land, great tragedy and misfortune. And this is something that of course happened what is now 3 years ago. However, we say in the Tibetan tradition that there is some recurrence that returns every year at the same time when some great tragedy has overcome us. Now, it could be said that there's some danger that some outer event happen which is parallel to the misfortune or tragedy that we've already experienced. But even in the absence of something happening outside of ourselves, still within us, this is a time of deep feeling. Our minds return to the event, whatever it is, and of course in this case the tragedy of September 11th, our minds return to that event and feel once again connected to the tragedy that befell us. And so we, in the Tibetan tradition, we have memorial services on days like today in order to bring our attention to the outer conditions, the inner conditions, and the secret conditions that contributed to our misfortune, to our tragedy. And we bring our prayers and our attention to this in order to resolve some of
these causes and conditions, to pacify them, to ensure that they do not ever return. And she says this will be the subject of the teaching today.
Kabla, then another can sang a needle tender yore, some weekend shit, and make can't yellow. Can neither Madena Madem Pasana Yunga Mar, the touch the can sang a needle tender go yore. That can sang a needle conditioner that the ring of Kabla, not to share there and the Ngambe can. She will check yore. The Ngambe can the Pananadu shit the Menelo get more than share your do to get the money Sangere. Then the Yimayang, Sinjan condition Charson Boresana, Nisun Zimba, again nowadays sharp, then Nisun Zimba Denver song, Nisun Zimba Pacha and 210, then the Nyumon drama Mambochi, Nang Shell. The Nyumon Batadal Tene, then it can wanda the Gu, can Tendre, Gu Morik Bache, can Trubache, Nyumon Bache, then it till a Tene, Drebu Dewa and Dunga de Jungu or a Gugan Tendre. The gang and buggy Trojan Chigayore, then again Zampo get Trojan Chigayore, the Truba in Bahako, Truba de Pambe Tabiore, Jambe Tabiore, Guru Tabiore, Troll Tabiore, Tapke number some Jimicaba the Sangan. Then can troll up again, then can Truba Yun Jambada, the Gan to the Ores.
We have what are called causes and conditions, and as ordinary sentient beings, we always live within the bounds of positive and negative circumstances. These make up our lives, and as ordinary persons, we can't do without living outside of these positive and negative circumstances. This is how things appear to us. Within our original abiding nature, who we are is primordial enlightenment. This is our abiding nature. However, we enter into deluded perception, and we have the perception of duality. And we begin to cling to this duality and think that it is real. And as we continue that pattern, this framework of duality becomes stronger, more solid, and it in fact becomes our reality. And within that dualistic framework, then, in that lack of recognition of our own abiding nature, we develop negative emotions, and these in turn, based on this basic cause of lack of recognition, we have many different positive and negative circumstances in these negative emotions, which in turn have us create positive and negative karma, which leads to the experience of happiness or suffering. And so this is how we end up being reliant upon positive and negative circumstances. Some, what we call negative circumstances, are those that lead us to continue our dualistic perception, lead us to continue deluded perception. What we call positive circumstances are those that lead us to liberation. However, in the face of negative circumstances, we can have, when something happens to us, which is obviously leading us into a stronger experience of dualism or delusion, we can have some strategy in relation to these negative circumstances. We can transform them in different ways, or we can change them in different ways to become positive experiences. We can renounce or reject those negative circumstances. We can purify them, we can transform them, or we can use them directly as somewhat of a catapult to liberation.
Oda tindri gyugyan tindri tanda yudu, kunzu bichu tam gyugyan tindri sobada tanda yorete yudu. Da kyan ngenpa chi chungna, nganzu dambe chula jugwe koda manchet na, kyan ngenpa dan chet tsadu, chet tsarare tila dogwe tab yomare. Dogwe tab yo samgire di rashur dang, sansha dang, chukzwe kukwane shewa drugwe yin seya ki tab dinde chukwe dang wala yo samgi yore dine shewa dang dewa di drugtubu yo mare. Nange shedang zhao matul na chi zhao tul yang pelwar gyur sonya de. Jigden la chukpa da, tsaba da, nai da, muge da, tenzu tamze donge de, saya ge tab, kunzu ge nangwa la tab nitse waji yore dene, tab nitse wa dege pan toge yomare, pan ma toge toge ne gene, sab cheru soge yore.
So at this point in our lives, we depend upon different causes, conditions, interconnectedness of things. This is our life within the bounds of the relative world. And within this relative world, we necessarily have to confront negative circumstances. However, as Buddhists, once we've entered into the Buddhist path, there are ways for us to employ these negative circumstances on the path. There's something that we can do. Without having entered the Buddhist path, we will of course confront negative circumstances, but without the Buddhist teachings, generally speaking, we might think to try to use negative circumstances, but usually what happens is that we meet something that is harmful to us with aggression, with weapons, with some sort of way of confronting aggressively that which has challenged us. And as the Buddha said, if you don't defeat the enemy of your own anger within yourself, when you attack your angry enemies outside of yourself, they'll only multiply. However much aggression that we use to confront these negative circumstances, that attitude will never pacify, will never solve the problems, these negative circumstances that are challenging us. this is not. Sorry,
That's what the guy said.
yes.
Boda tendri yindu the tambe chuji gola tene then negap down the nodula ne down muga down san la soboge dunga chinye yoba de tamje negap dunga da shitoba that's shiwa some masepe tartu tangi dunga ki singate ming zamya meba Lama Tharchin Rinpoche shiva tap tamo mayin bode tene tambe chugi gola yore te yobola tene ngaranzo ge rigdan kingor tangje ge kyabda chenbo Orgyen sogi Dorje mi sosu chamba trube Terchen Dudjom jigro yeshi Dorje ge Dorje jagi sombe malam toboche sigyore odati nando tereng te kol tangbol dengi yin tene te jela Kyabje Dorje chan Dudjom jigro yeshi Dorje ge ngolop tangje ge naune Tor Kyurba tene trube wanchu kedu nigi da nichen mangyur tembe shingda chenbo Kyabje Chatral sangi Dorje ge song jikdenge sangi kaba dobe malam doboche sigyore te nyede tren tangbudele te shogi
When this world has wars, famine, diseases, epidemics, etc., these are things that can be confronted with outer solutions. We can bring some means to deal with these things in an outer way. However, these will not bring long-term benefits. Whatever sort of solution we try to solve these outer problems with, these are only temporary solutions. When we enter the Buddhist path, we can bring an inner solution to these problems, and we can pacify the suffering that they cause. However, we can even do more than that on the Buddhist path. We can attain a state and help others attain a state which is entirely beyond suffering, where there is not even the name of these different forms of suffering, where there's no trace left of any of these forms of suffering. All of these forms of suffering exist in the relative world, and we have means to confront those challenges or those outer negative circumstances through our inner practice. However, the goal of our inner practice, or the potential of our inner practice, goes beyond the relative world to a state entirely without suffering. So today, and particularly this morning, we will be looking at two prayers, the first of which was written by the Lord of countless clans of enlightenment, countless sacred circles of deities of enlightenment, a master who was Guru Rinpoche, Lake-born Vajra, incarnate in human form. And his name, he was known to us as Dudjom Rinpoche, Dorje. And we will be looking at one prayer that he wrote called the Prayer for World Peace. And then we will also look at a prayer by His Holiness Dudjom Rinpoche's main disciple, who is both learned, who is a both learned and accomplished master, by the name of Chatral Rinpoche, Sanjay Dorje. So these two, then one is called Prayer for World Peace and the second is called the Seer's Truthful Speech.
The Konambe dancing Drubma Malam said, Dembetsik, Dembetsik de Kansa Shola Yore, Condition Demba the Yore Senate. Thing on the chick the Dembare, chick the Zimbare say, I think it Zimba de Pan, Demba Demsha with Demba Tinda Mare, Shuni Jingo, Ye Demane, Dandam Gingo, Ginelu. Chuni Demenelu de Ngondu Kurdebe, Kansaki, Tenin Tila Dorje Sumgedani and Chavayore Go Shamshid and Chawa Sung Chadong Kianga Meba Tu Jidong Chunyi Jingo Dorje Sum Gingola Kurshin Debatinzuki Dorje Jagi Ombone Sung Yombe Tsikti Shedabuji Malam Shedar Taba de Nosum to Drup to Bayore or that Tindegi Tinachin Lapchimbo Yore.
Prayers by these two masters, these prayers or supplications by these two masters, are what we call the true speech. Now, when we say that their speech accomplishes the truth, or that the truth exists within their speech, this is not to say that their speech is true where somebody else's is false, or that they've given up saying something that's false and they only say what is true. Their speech is different from that. Their speech reflects the nature of reality, the primordial abiding nature. Great individuals who have accomplished or realized the primordial abiding nature have speech which accomplishes it, what they say. It reflects reality, reflects the nature of reality, and by repeating their speech, it becomes true. Now, their realization is such that on the level of their bodies, their physical presence is beyond change, is not destroyed. On the level of their speech, their voices reflect sound and emptiness, inseparable. And their voices arise in an unceasing display. And their minds are the union of awareness and emptiness. And they abide within the nature of reality. And so their speech, when they formulate these prayers or the supplications, these are not just true words, they are words of the true nature. And by repeating them, their words they take on reality because they reflect the nature of reality and therefore have very great blessings.
Malam Chalapche chenpo chunyi di rangda le chenpe malam masi za chenpo chenlap chenpo re malam di chenlap chenpo re tene khande chene nganzu ndrubo yo re nganzu ke malam khande chene ndrubo re se na tabu yimba la yimbar shebe medobe teba tembo ngone tene nin 타고네 된 Guru Rinpoche dungi nankala gom de malam tabe pangbola de sum sangye tang jeke shizu shimbola danse drube malam ke pangbola shuk solne den de la le nga ye sum ke chik du drilne tene teba dang mugu dang ye keshe ki teba medobe teba dang chebe gone tanganzu jikden de la trube jesu ka kyam tene negab chi dunga dang tene de dunga de drubje ki gyu nange nyomomba dang de tang je 신앙의 게 벌써 탕제 녀월 시대 되는 Guru Rinpoche 캐했다고 또 규메 dorje 고 가메 창배 양 저저 dorje 투게 다니 챈도 dorje 숨게 다니 챈도 간두게 고숨라 주데 캐다 니수 메버 교원 제도 소 냠베 이 캐시기 대바 때모 증언에 되는 데나 랑게 대바다 되는 그룹이 투쟁이 데 알론다 저기 잡았다 보게 거네 되는 제고 라도 베요레.
So how are individuals like us, how are persons like us to practice, to recite such supplications? We do so with faith. We do so with unchanging faith. We think to ourselves that these words of great blessing, great power, reflect the nature of reality. And we, once again, as was said before, we think that this is the nature of reality, that these words do reflect the nature of reality. We think this is the way it is. And so, with this faith, we imagine sitting before us in space Guru Rinpoche as he who will witness our recitation of these supplications. And we think of Guru Rinpoche with the same unchanging faith. We think of Guru Rinpoche with great openness, thinking, Guru Rinpoche, may you know my mind, may you know exactly who I am. And we unite our body, our voice, and our mind as one, intent upon this supplication, intent with prayer, intent upon thinking of all beings together with us, also reciting this prayer. We think of all of the outer negative circumstances, thinking of that we wish that all the outer negative circumstances be pacified for ourselves and for all sentient beings. That the inner circumstances which lead to outer misfortunes, that is to say, our negative emotions, our negative acts, that all of these as well become entirely pacified. And so we recite these prayers in Guru Rinpoche's presence with the thought of Guru Rinpoche as representing the three Vajras of enlightenment, this changeless body, unobstructed speech, a mind dwelling within the nature of reality. And we think of Guru Rinpoche thinking that we will follow Guru Rinpoche and in that way become inseparable with Guru Rinpoche. And so as we recite this prayer, our faith and the compassion of Guru Rinpoche become like a hook and a ring. The compassion of Guru Rinpoche being like the hook, and our faith, our devotion and dedication becoming like a ring that the hook grabs. And it is in this way that we recite these prayers.
Then that chidardu sawan debe tsudre. Chidardu sawan deb sadu chigi ngado chigen sa chu me lungna soboge jongwe da tamje guru tuje ke shitogre donge jongwa nebe da neba donge tamje shitogre nangi lugi pombo nasa serso lasangwa tamjaya nangi dongaya malam toboshi dedawoge shitogre sangwa nyomumbage trudo tamjaya dune guru to chuni nyamba nyegi longdo yermedo trode sangwe dongaya shitogre tate shitadu nado jikdembe malam loburgi dunga nyinse wala kyabje konon chedewa tabu mare tardu tengi dewa true manyonga sala kyayage topdan nuba de malam tendol yore.
So this then is the way in which we recite this prayer in an outer fashion. And this style of this kind of prayer has the capacity of pacifying all of the outer negative circumstances that we can encounter. For example, any of the when any of the five elements, earth, air, fire, water, space, arise as enemies to us, as challenges to us, the compassion, Guru Rinpoche's compassion, can pacify these elements. As well, by reciting this kind of powerful prayer, on our inner negative circumstances, for example, sickness or the pain of sickness, can be entirely pacified. All of our suffering in relation to our sickness and the pain of our sickness can be pacified. And further, on the level of our minds, when our minds are become seemingly filled with negative thoughts or deluded perception, such prayers can allow our minds, all these deluded perceptions, to become liberated within our own primordial place, which has never experienced delusion. Within this primordial expanse of our mind is inseparable with the mind of Guru Rinpoche. And so this prayer, this style of prayer is not only useful for pacification, the calming of outer negative circumstances, but also for allowing us to access our primordial abiding nature and to enter into the realm not only of pacification of outer circumstances but of realization.
Oda tendri yindu tangbo Deba sengde tanda laba nashi tsa chimbo re Deba yagbo shi jitsadu Tene Deba sengde nganzo shen la yi che Deba tawa tende mare mi shenpa chigla jikdenpa chigla Deba chen la yi che ge yina digi tudu re Deba di kari gurumbu che la che bare gurumbu che di ye Dema ne nambar thakbe sangye re Debe sangye re nganzo tamche maungbe sangye re tene Deba da mugu di 참절게 심전당 상계니데 참절사게데 간두시는 저거시도 대바다 먹을 떡에 저거요래 오다 되게 선대님 타반에 야고지체 되네 타 구루기 토다 란슨 이에메발라 세네 되네 때에서 냠버샤게이나 대자첨보요래.
So we recite this prayer with faith. Faith, as she said, he explained earlier, but this faith isn't just giving your trust to what somebody else says. You know, as if you're listening to somebody else who's also a person like yourself, and you're trusting more or less what that other person says. When we consider Guru Rinpoche is the appearance of primordial enlightenment. Guru Rinpoche is the form of enlightenment, is the Buddha of the past. That is to say, he is Buddha, an individual who has already attained enlightenment. We are all persons who will attain, we are future Buddhas. We are people who will attain enlightenment in the future. How are we to make this connection between those who have attained enlightenment and ourselves, sentient beings who will later attain enlightenment? This connection is made through faith and through devotion. And so we regard Guru Rinpoche with this single-minded, wholehearted faith and devotion, and consider that our minds merge with the minds of Guru Rinpoche, and we allow our minds then to settle in evenness, our minds and Guru Rinpoche's mind as one. And this is a very important preliminary to recitation of this prayer.
대바티 떡게 가르치고서도 진압된 주요용거래. 진압된 주요인데 진압되게 떡게 되네 옛 더만에 랑규라 내대베 더마시 내로 상게 되는 것도 세트그래.
With faith, we receive blessings. And faith is the avenue to blessings, to receiving blessings. And as with this faith, what does this mean that we receive blessing? It is with this faith that we can awake to what is our original primordial nature, our original primordial enlightenment, this abiding nature that is changeless, this abiding nature that has always been, is always, and will always be our nature. It is this faith that opens us up to be able to awaken to this our own abiding nature.
오늘 되게 돈에 즉 루직 돈에 셰나 반응 뭐 생긴데 먼저 Damashi Nelute Semgan More, taking more on it, Truliazana Yomare, True Segamare, True Shangamare, Kare is an angode, Yerme Ronyam, give long chick, Matochilla, Nidan Sumchen, Zea Yomare, Yermegan Mola. Truba de Sega Yomare. Tam Truba de Kane Shar Yomare Sidu. The Damashi Nelu Nelu Kada Tomba Niki Long Tela. Lunduk Chisag Yeshi Charung Nubajansi dancing Jore. Think it down the Chisal de Shar Yondu. Then number Shisalji Yeshes, no Nangsolji Yeshik Tsao Manga by Yundang Chadil, Lundrugungo, the Chisala, Nang Yumbe Dusu, that Trusat Nawaton and Trundru.
This primordial original nature is what we call the essence of our mind. And in this essence, there is no delusion. There has never been any delusion. There can never be any delusion. This essence is inseparable. It's one within the inseparable expanse. And it's not possible for there to be two essences of our mind. It is always the same, it is always inseparable. And at that level, we can never experience any delusion, confusion. That is our primordial nature. Now, within this expanse of emptiness, which is the essence of our mind, there is the spontaneous presence of inner luminosity, an inner glow. And this inner glow is as if brimming with the potential for radiance, outward radiance. Now at this point there's still no possibility of delusion. However, when this inner glow produces the outward display of wisdom, this outwardly appearing luminosity, it is within this display that delusion can occur, or has occurred. Within the essence, there is never the possibility of delusion. However, when the inner luminosity, its qualities appear outwardly as a dynamic expression or as the display of this essence, it is in relation to that we can experience delusion.
Odati Nangsalge Da Mangabe Zaldi and Chilu Shayundu, then it's Zal Zimbachen and Trudore. Zaldi Ranzalimba Shen Mangabe Chayimba Shen Nawatan Jingo Chuni Yimba Shen then Chuni Yitzale Nanyumba Shen the Nandon Sungju Yamaraba Yimba de Hakodu, then the Truba Yomare.
In relation to this display, when our inner luminosity of the essence of our mind appears outwardly, this outwardly appearing radiance or luminosity, this display of all appearances, all phenomena, if we take this to be something other, if we have clinging in relation to it, this is the source of delusion. However, if we recognize this display, all phenomena, as being the display of our inner essence, when we recognize that it is the union of emptiness and appearance, when we recognize that it is nothing other than this outwardly appearing display of the essence of our mind, in this case we have we do not experience delusion. We see it as being the same nature of reality, of the essence of our mind appearing outwardly, that its nature and our enlightened nature are one and the same.
Sangye namge tu ne kyabdal ne simjen namge semne dumbur ne es lo dumbu basula ne deba de ta simjen re de kyabare.
When we say that there is delusion, what are we identifying as delusion? That is clinging. Clinging, and particularly dualistic clinging, dualistic experience. This attitude of self and other, what we call dualistic experience, that is the source of all suffering. That is the source of all delusion. The essence of our mind and all the display of this essence of mind are pure, are in equal purity. And this is an all-pervasive, all-encompassing space. And when we see the essence and its display within this encompassing expanse of evenness and purity, this is not a deluded state. However, when we take this experience of encompassing expanse as being a self, and which then experiences 1, 100, 1,000, 100,000, unlimited numbers of others, then this is our dualistic experience. And this is what we call experience of a sentient being. It's a piece of mind. It's a partial experience. It is said that the experience of enlightenment, the experience of all enlightened beings, all Buddhas, is this all-encompassing expanse, whereas a sentient being experiences only a piece of mind, or their experience is partial.
당아주 소데 가리 거기여서나 동에도 방고기여래. 다 동에도 가네 총발에 세드 녀몽반에 총발에. 녀몽박도 가네 총발에 세드 니순점반에 총대여래. 어다때 인도 동에도 매바 소단데 데 동에게 규데 함하고 규게 싸워데 함하고 나 동에게 레부드 빵투가 말해. 다데 빵베 탑데 가르쳐 버리세도 삼바. 땅 모은에로 토바. 네 톱나. 데네 동에게 규녀모 바생데 야마레. 데 녀모바 데 니순점 바생데 야마레. 니순점바 메도 녀모바 야마레. 녀모바 메도 동에 야마레. 동에 메도 코르와 야마레. oda tiki ta tsawa di kari hako gori siddhi tsamba nisu mebe tengi togo yore.
what we want to do, what our project is to try to rid ourselves of suffering. And in order to do so, we have to look at where the suffering has come from. Suffering comes from our negative or afflictive emotions, which in turn come from our dualistic clinging. This is the source of our suffering, this dualistic clinging. So in order to be able to solve the dilemma of our suffering, we have to somehow resolve our habit of dualistic clinging. And in order to do so, we settle within the essence of our minds. This essence is non-dual expanse. When there is no dualistic experience, there is no negative emotions. With no negative emotions, no suffering. With no suffering, no continual turning within the wheel of life. So this then, in order to be able to solve our suffering, in order to be able to put an end to our suffering, we must see where it comes from. And in this case, we must rest, settle within the essence of our mind, this non-dual experience.
That the indeed, the Dudjom Bushilabit, the Dorje, Nyomobati, Ganesha Yombare, said the Semgit Salnisha Yombare. But the Nyomobati Semgit Sali Bahako. Then it Sal Tege Rolba Singati. Nyomobati Semgit Salnisha Yomba Yendu. Sal the Kayan Chatral, Tada, Mutan Yamare, Tawasangi, Shinkamtar Doyan, Semgit Sale Shartaviyore, Madava Korwe, Ritugin Tamjayan, Salne Sharyambare, Salne Sharwala, Zanga Yomare, then in Zimbabwe Toke. Then Nyomomba Chandraviyore. Other the Yendu Tade, Nyomomba Semgit Sal Yimbashi. Yondu Nyomomba Rolba de Carres and a Pana Nime said the Nimagit Salres, then a Yula Truthful Orgyen Nawat Chatral nobody Sal the Yula Roll Drobe Kabla, then a Nimage Nuba Mubas Sang Tobata. Truthful work pel tobata, the Tamje Tar Rolbares, Rolbares. Or that thing in the Nyomombati, you, they do Nezula roll Yombekala, then in Drebu they do Dewada Dongatam, Yonkan, Simge Rolbares. Nyomombati Salre, they do get Sorwachung sort of Tamje Rolbares. Or that the thought in it.
She says we've spoken a lot already this morning, and he'd like to come to a conclusion. The conclusion has to do with what is the dynamic expression of our minds. Our minds can produce, from this essence of our mind, we can produce pure dynamic expression, such as the Pure Lands of the Buddhas, or impure dynamic expression can arise from our minds, such as the realms of this wheel of life. Anything is possible. There is no limit to what our minds will produce. Now, we have arising from our mind this dynamic expression, and then we have how it displays before us. For example, we say that the rays of the sun are the sun's dynamic expression. When those rays arrive to this world, they bring light and they bring heat. That is their display. In the same way, our minds produce different emotions, and these emotions are the dynamic expression of mind. And then when these emotions encounter circumstances, their display is the experience of suffering or of happiness. Based on what arises from our minds, we experience suffering and happiness. So the same way that sun's rays, these are like the emotions, and the heat and the light that the sun brings are like the experiences of happiness and suffering that our emotions bring. So to begin with, when we experience suffering, it is important at the beginning to recognize that this experience of suffering is the display of our afflictive emotions. What we experience, first of all, from our minds, these emotions have arisen. This is like the dynamic expression of the essence of our mind. And then when we experience suffering or happiness, in particular in this case suffering, we recognize that, first of all, as being the display of these emotions.
That the ngosung yonde the top drama the Sodargi Luxula did do with Sarwati Paya Tapchigi Yore, Shansenla Jangyaga Tap Yore, Sangala Guryaga Tap Yore, then Nado Zogwachembo Janlu La, then it tapped into Chiglayan Tango Yomare, Tikari Sana Nyandu Tardo. Mebang, Shansen tar Mijong, Sanga tar Mijur, Tenet Desam de Mayimbe, Tandu Yam Mele, Nobor Yam Meta, Mibachendo Gomiam Magom, Net Trudu Mebate Moshe, Yumba Totel, Moshen Totel. In
relation then to the suffering that arises, we have within Buddhism various ways that we can deal with this suffering. In the Hinayana, we can reject or renounce these various sensations of suffering or happiness. In the Mahayana, we can purify our suffering and happiness, all of this display of our mind. In the Vajrayana, we transform it. However, within our practice of Dzogchen, great perfection, we neither renounce our experiences of happiness or suffering, nor do we purify them, nor do we transform them. We do not in any way fixate upon these experiences. We do not solidify them. We do not cling to them. We see them, we recognize them, and allow our minds to settle in evenness within that recognition, without any contrivance, without any intervention on our part. We rest within that simple recognition.
Kyabje namke kuryuta buchige longla ne degre degi nebe ngala kyabje namke kuryuta bu tongshi dame ba kyabje chimbuga longla ne dedu dine rigbade rigbage salcha mangaba tangso nyokwa chaldeba rigbage kenchagi ngardan dembachi shige ridan nisu mebachi yeshede sharyam kare.
With this recognition, what takes place is that the dynamic expression of mind and the display, that is to say these emotions, and the experience of happiness or suffering dissolve. They fade within a vast, all-encompassing expanse. This dynamic expression and the display of mind dissolve into the essence of mind. And within this all-encompassing expanse arises awareness. Awareness that is vivid, strong, pure, and all of the dynamic expression and the display of our minds vanish without any trace whatsoever within that expanse of emptiness and awareness.
That thing on the cut, ne, tobochi, ne, young, then digging on the young singit out, yo young back up so. Then I rig down Mugus along the kennel, Paria. Then they get sure some more than che. Then you give me do someone did talk, sure some more than che. Subject, then they get Lama down che. They get cutting the tenor range. Semyi ngo rane gi chugu rangsha ja yubande kande so de chambo do samne ya de regdan de mugu sulam de kene sawata ne ya to yisene yangja nyambarsha oti de remeche de yana de nyamne la bo ya botangre.
Now we dwell within this abiding nature of awareness and emptiness for as long as we can. But once again, our mind, this dynamic expression of mind again arises. Our minds move. And at that point, what we can do is to bring our attention to the continual practice of devotion. We think to ourselves, I have had the fortune of encountering these teachings. I've gained this precious human existence. I've been introduced to seeing the face of my own mind as being the Dharmakaya, the body of ultimate enlightenment. How incredibly fortunate I am, what an incredible merit I have in having been able to receive these teachings, to have this life. How incredibly kind my teachers are to have introduced this to me. And within these thoughts of devotion, of respect, we again make prayers mentally. We again merge our mind with the mind of Guru Rinpoche, and once again enter into this experience of awareness and emptiness. And in this way, we can go between our resting within awareness and ordinary movement of mind. And if we do so, this will very much enrich our meditative experience.
Nisu mebe yeshe chunyi ngola tatude dene nyinzing lo de shigdogres nimege nisu mebe chunyi ngola ne debetusu nisu zense de tsane meba nubdogres nganzul sem chigma do yomare sem chig de ngowe ne zu kundu samboda ye macheba shude ba dige rangshala tane nyambar shadedu dene nyinzing lo de yontogo yomare nyinzing lo mena nyomomba de yontogo yomare nyomomba mena de nyomomba ge le de yontogo yomare le de mena dewadan dumha ge Ngawang korwasaya de yontogo yomare korwa de me sabesadi kareresidu ye deme nelu kundu sambo sa de maombala te magoba tada kisi matega ranla kundu sambo da nisu meba ngol neage tabdan sherab nige chewa tumo mahimba
when we are able to dwell in this way within this non-dual awareness, the non-dual wisdom of the nature of reality, at that moment there is no dualistic perception, no dualistic mind that exists at the same time. Our mind is only one. We only have one mind. And so, at the time that we abide, gazing at our own face as the nature of the Buddha, ever excellent Samantabhadra, we gaze at our own primordial nature. At that moment, we have no dualistic experience. Because we have no dualistic experience, we have no afflictive emotions. Because no afflictive emotions, we do not create karma. And without karma, we do not create the wheel of life. Not creating the wheel of life is, in the absence of creation of the wheel of life, this is the primordial ground of the Buddha, ever excellent Samantabhadra. This experience is not something, the experience of this primordial state of enlightenment is not something that we have to think of as far distant in the future. These teachings can lead us to this experience at this very moment, in an instant. It is possible for us to have access to this experience of the primordial state of the Buddha, ever excellent.
Dunga lam kirgi dambas, dunga lam du kerwe damba, tene penat ringi tizendi nanzo Amerige longbala kange teze chongbe tizore, tegi chenpa de so yondu tene me mangbola samnat nonda chigyumbe yore. Oda di peshavne, di tsumbe, de lasoba. Nondu samge namdola seya tsana yomare. Namdola seya medu nyomomba sega yomare. Nyomomba de masedu le sega yomare. Le de masedu deduga nawa de tsane se tuga mare. Tegi mela korwa sere. Tati lugdos jenrudu tena korwa nyangde stro lungjung korwa tro lugdo ke sanje drumra lux dogba oda ti chetuna tena nekap ki dumya tam maase be thartu tendo ya dumya ki ming samya medebe sade tad yeji dama kundu sangba satire, sanje yangtakba sanje choji kobe sat singade dire, sanje choji kode jene drubwa mare rangla yore, rangla... Oh, that's this is the idea of, today, September 11th, happening one time 3 years ago, but that a habit, a kind of fear, is it continue repeating. And one way is a bad time, but worldly point and the bad is bad, then that's sad. But Dharma point, bad is not that bad. Bad can bring good things too. For example, relative level, our country is too comfortable. Everybody become lazy. Includes what called the cigarette police who are watching and the protector. And they're also relaxed. We call your head is rotting, but the nose can't smell it. That's happened. But even though that is relative level, and everybody and walk up and pay attention and doing best we can, kind of alert, everybody wake up. And that's good things, see? That bad brings as a good. That case we have to thank for Bin Laden. Thank you. You wake up calling. And the same way, bigger way, we always say, oh, I'm bad person, bad practitioner, I have so much afflictive emotion, negative-minded, as a bad things. But that's bad. Ego, self-clinging, ignorance, lack of understanding, lack of recognition of our original Buddha nature. That is most stupid and the worst thing, anything happen in this world, that's the bad things. But that bad also is really good. Without this ignorance, we can pay attention to our original Buddha nature, then when we will wake up. This is a kind of is a good wake-up calling. And something happening, any kind of suffering, suffering related with the outer elements, suffering related with the inner physical body, suffering related with the secret mental confusion, whatever sufferings there are. And it brings good things. If you're willing to recognize, then, and especially today, His Holiness Dudjom, which is Vajra word, prayer related with that, and we're doing this kind of holy. Pay attention into us. Then a technique is, all of this display of a mind. Then you can, through the recognition of that display of your mind, then you have a chance to see your own essence of a mind, which is undiluted, undefaulted, originally pure nature. And you got a chance to one moment seeing this, how to compare any kind of good things happen to us. We call the good things, but never last. This will last forever. That's why ever excellent Kundu Sangpo Buddha is not somebody, is an individual essence of your mind itself is Kundu Sangpo. Then we have a chance to facing directed to Kundu Sangpo, and we have an opportunity to being with the Kundu Sangpo, Samatha Bhaja. That's the best to best. There's no higher or no better than anything. That kind of, without emotion, there's no wisdom. Without a recognition of a wisdom, then attaining enlightenment is no any other way. All these bad things bring the good things too. Therefore, if you're willing to, or aware, you're willing to do this incredible, profound technique, teachings, and Buddha brings Buddha Samatha Bhaja in your hand. Then you can, that's that technique. It's just Lama Ngawang said lots of beautiful things in your own language. But he wanted me to say broken English too. He feels that he speaks a perfect English, then you not concentrated well. Oh, so good, relaxed. Then when I use my broken English, you go like this, brings a good concentration. See, any kind of bad things brings a good one. Includes my broken English. Brings a concentration. That's something, there's a good too. Mm-hmm. And then you can, this is the technique. then you can do it. Practice with the whole your life. This practice goes with any kind of practice. This kind of practice is not like a tradition, not a religion, not a culture. That's the nature. This nature has all single sentient being. Then, as a directly waking up is it's called wisdom, and you're willing to start with a good motivation, and techniques are called skillful means, and truly waking up within your true nature of mind is called the wisdom. Then we have to do this in order to remove any kind of suffering, and the most powerful technique. Then don't think I will do one time, because it's so powerful, doesn't have to do many times, I will do just one. Don't take that excuses. Do it until you got a result. Because our mind, confusion never ends. And some place we can, even though how bad practitioner I am, I never think any practitioner can be worse than myself. But still, for me, it brings incredible joys without depending on the relative material kind of temporary joy things. And I have a total faith, trust. This is the only one technique to how to find permanent happiness. Even though I don't have a realization, but I totally trust. I'm not searching anything better technique than this. Then you can repeat it again, again. And the same things we repeat it again, every day, every week, every month, every year, every lifetime. Look at how solid, concrete samsara we created. That's come from power of repetition. And the same way, opposite way, we can repeat this again. Thinking Guru Rinpoche. Guru Rinpoche is inseparable our own original Buddha nature, and keep repeating, seeing again, making familiar. And if we do that, then our afflictive emotion will get less and less. Faith and devotion increase more and more, and that faith and devotion will bring experience more and more. Experience brings a realization more and more. We can repeat that way, then all other side kind of afflictive emotion got less and less. Then that negative karma got less and less. Negative karma got less, then suffering got less and less, and someday at the complete exhaustion of a samsara. Samsara, how to empty. And remember that, go back to what is the samsara? It's the suffering. Where suffering come from? Karma. Where karma come from? Afflictive emotion. Where afflictive emotion come from? Under dualistic. Where's the dualistic come from? Essence of non-duality wisdom, nature. And how we came from confused go back to opposite direction as a liberation. Then you can try to repeat that again, again. That's called the practice, that kind of making a good habit, less bad habit, more good habit. Then that goes beyond bad and good. Then we call it freedom. Then Shepherd asked me, what do you say, sing or chant?
Sing.
Sing. Oh. I will try. Okay. That, and I think doesn't need to read Tibetan and Kyabje Chatral, which is prayer. I think everybody can do English with the Lama Ngawang. We all do. I didn't bring my reading glasses. Then this letter is a little too small for me. But you can say it. I can listening, and now I have a chance. I'm not going to do it. I talked too much, and now you can say something. I will listen. Your turn.
Okay, we'll start at this Sanskrit supplication at the beginning, and go down to the page 2 at the end of the intended paragraph. Okay, so page 1. Namo Guru Ratna Trayaya, spiritual master and triple gems, to you I bow. Universal leader of the fortunate age, crown of the Shakyas, second Buddha, Orgyen, Lakeborn Vajra. The Buddha's 8 closest spiritual heirs, sublime, exalted bodhisattvas, such as all-seeing one, gentleman, Pride in your 21 forms, host of venerable elders, Guru's spiritual masters, masters of the lineage, deities both peaceful and wrathful, Dakinis of the 3 locations, guardians of the teachings, protectors of the directions, 70 glorious lords and others born from
Clairvoyant, powerful, magical, and mighty, behold and ponder the beings of this age of turmoil, I pray. Kneeling fortunate beings at the end of time, watch the lake of our collective bad karma overflow. Positive influences fade, the spores of dark demons inflame the hearts of great and powerful men, who raise armies bearing nuclear weapons and ravage the world. These arms, fashioned by the magic of evil wishes, can unleash a destructive hurricane to instantly annihilate the world and all those within it. Ill omens of this swift approaching ruin are obvious to our eyes, ears, and minds. Yet foolish people are deeply caught in the nets of doubt and dullness, and still no more fear. Merely to hear or think about this unprecedented danger is terrifying. We are powerless to stop it, and we have no harbor of hope, but you, infallible triple gems and true roots. We implore you like children calling their parents. We beg you with this supplication, do not falter in your mission promise. Swift hand with your compassion, protect and shelter us defenseless beings, and deliver us from danger. When powerful, uncivilized men who rob the world of its pleasures and happiness gather in councils of war, please turn the leaders and their henchmen, steeped in wild, evil, vicious thoughts, to peace, happiness, and harmony. Calm warring armies' conflicts, stop and defuse the demons' atomic weapons. Make stable the lives of those who preserve the doctrine, and stretch spiritual study and practice to every corner of the globe. Eliminate the root network support and the names of evil humans and spirits who harm the teachings and meanings. Fill this worldly realm with universal happiness and goodness, that all might enjoy the four kinds of glory: spiritual teachings, love, pleasure, and freedom. As in the age of wholeness, may there be neither strife nor harm, and may we join together in dances of joyous delight. By the compassion of our refuge, the ocean of truthful gems, and by the power of truth, the absolute expanse, so on in all places and times, may the goal of this, our prayer of pure intention, come true just as we hope and pray.
We can do Tibetan 3 times, His Holiness Dudjom Rinpoche.
Dzam jeda yugan de da du ne mo zan zo du me me ra che de zo na ben jo kon du be da du zhe xin de le ben zo jo Dzam jeda yugan de da du ne mo zan zo do me me ra je ne zana ben jo gong du be da du zha xin de le ben zo jo Dzam jeda yugan de da du ne mo zan zo do me me ra che de zana ben jo gong du be da du zha xin de le ben zo jo
Thank you. Now we can have a lunch break, right? Then see you this afternoon. We can continue gossiping. I will tell you some dirty jokes this afternoon.
Sunam de yin dam je ze va yin dam ne nye be danam bam je ge ga na je ba la jo ba si bin so ro gan ro wa sho zhe he zhe gan ze wang ren zhen be me dong zu ban zhen na san da ba ne do ge le ne ben ge xiang de za zhe be he zhe gan ze wang ren zhen be me dong zu ban zhen na san da ba Gele no ben ge shabdan sa de sho drve hero ga sawan ren zen ben men dong so ban chen na san da ba ne do Gele no ben ge shabdan sa Ranze manga dejen doje go mezem barve tentro wal dendo renze pemendo Relun zembala thasam dawe go sha razem be tenjan la me shabe ta den ne chen chodu me yeshin kamge chenjo kaden la me zo sedan ro daru Tekjo se nyingbe tenpa la se shun be men rinji lo yu reish. Yemen,